Hey everybody, welcome to Wednesday. It's shockingly a relatively good news Wednesday. By the way, if you're in chat, Zaphod, if you're serious, call in and explain to me why you want that and the specifics. That would be interesting. Yesterday was an election day with a number of big um, issues and races of concern. Um, and, as you know, I'm constantly stunned that the current president, Joe Biden, is running neck and neck, or even in some cases, slightly behind the former president, Donald Trump. Another new poll I saw shocked me in making it an almost three-way race between Biden, Trump, and uh, Kennedy. And I'm dumbfounded at how dumb we are. Across the board dumb. Like that anything could be that close. I'm always amazed when it's like 51% of the people are in favor of this when it's something that's just absolutely obvious and decent. Like, should we outlaw vitamin C? No, of course not. But oh no, 50% of people want to outlaw fucking vitamin C. Not just stop taking it. They want to ban it for everybody else. It's the weirdest thing. Nobody's actually doing that. I picked something obvious for this. In Kentucky, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear beat the Trump endorsed Daniel Cameron to retain some semblance of sanity in Kentucky. And that's that's wonderful because I love Kentucky. I don't get out there often enough. I have friends that live there. I would love to go back out there soon. I love Kentucky, but this was an important race, and not the least of which is that the Republican nominee had Trump's endorsement, and that's basically becoming the kiss of death in politics. At least on down ballot basis, it races. It may be still not the kiss of death for him, but for the down ballot races, it's not a good thing. Then in Ohio, issue number one, the Constitutional Abortion Protection Amendment passed, and Ohio became the seventh state to protect abortion access since Roe was overturned. Now, I went after somebody on Twitter just the other day for lying about this. Some sports reporter who ended up blocking me because I called him out for his lies. Some sports reporter was basically suggesting that this was a way of denying parental freedom. That if we voted a no vote was to protect parental freedom, and so by portraying it as if it's parental freedom to deny you the option to abort is what they were doing. They're basically just lying. In Virginia, and this, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that issue one in Ohio passed, but Virginia might be my favorite because it's a Democratic sweep. Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin in Virginia was working with his Republican cohorts to outlaw abortion in Virginia. Well, Glenn Youngkin lost last night. The Democrats defeated him. There'll be a new Democratic governor in Virginia. And while the Democrats already controlled the majority in the Virginia Senate, they flipped the House so that now Democrats will control the entire government in Virginia. Now, make no mistake, this is about abortion. This is about attempts to ban and outlaw abortion. This is about people who never thought Roe could be overturned saying, okay, you did that and you said you're going to leave it up to the states, and now we're going to make sure that we're protecting it. Ohio became the seventh state to protect abortion rights access and codified in their constitution since Roe was overturned. I count Virginia basically as the eighth. I know they haven't put it in their constitution yet, but this was an overwhelming, just absolute shellacking that MAGA got, and the Make America Great Again, or Make Attorneys Get Attorneys, however you want to look at it, is crumbling, and Trump's losing his mind. There was a report that he called one of his reporters or one of his lawyers a little fucker because something in one of his cases potentially got moved to right in the middle of the primaries, and he's like, "You just cost me the presidency," and he's got his kids testifying. If I'm a little confused, it's because I'm just gleeful. And so it's a parade of good news. Now, tonight, there's a GOP debate. Jimmy's going to be going live with the Sometime Show. I think it's I think it's an episode of the Sunshine Show. Anyway, Jimmy's going live after we're done here to cover the GOP debate. I'm definitely going to watch it. You'll probably see me comment and chat. Chris Christie, and 4 others will be there, and I'm betting that they will begin ramping up the distancing and outright repudiation, in the case of Christie, from Trump. There'll be 5 people on that stage who currently stand 0 chance of ever becoming president, in a debate that is absolutely useless for the GOP, because the GOP doesn't care about anything but blowing Trump. And the only thing that tonight's debate really does is serve to show us how they spin and panic and abandon ship when the country comes out and says, no more of this, which is what happened yesterday. They are all going to have to make changes to how and what they say tonight, and that will serve as much amusement for me as I watch them either continue to worship at the altar of Trump, hoping that the down ballot curse of Trump doesn't actually hit them, or they will, like what Chris Christie's doing, turn against Trump and pretend that they knew this all along, or that they had the high ground all along, rather than Chris Christie, who was anti-Trump, then really liked Trump, and now is anti-Trump again. It's embarrassing watching them twist and turn like twisting and turning things. Now, I've also expected that Jimmy will spend some time talking about Joe Biden and whether or not he should run or who should potentially replace him. But tune in for all of that tonight after we're done here on the Hang Up. There's one other thing to address, and that is the bit of news that I don't think is good. Not the least of which is that we still have 2 wars or warlike conflicts, depending on how you want to look at them, going on, not the least of which is what's going on in Gaza. And the House of Representatives voted to censure Michigan Representative Rashida Tlaib. And it was, I think, primarily for 2 things. One was that she specifically used the phrase "from the river to the sea," which has 2 different connotations to 2 different groups of people. Just to one group of people, it is a call for the extermination of Jews in the Jewish state. To another group of people, it's a call for one state with Jews and Arabs protecting the freedoms of everyone from the river to the sea. It's a problematic phrase she should not have used. Additionally, she immediately shared and reshared what we now know to be at least unreliable, if not completely untrue, information about the claim that Israel had bombed a hospital. I fully understand that as a representative of the United States government with a public voice, there are certain things that our elected representatives and senators should not say, because they are representing not just themselves, but the entirety of the American government to the world. She said some things that were problematic. She shared information that appears to be false. But more than her getting that wrong, it's the hypocrisy about this censure that bugs me. Because others, not just on this issue, but others in support of Israel, have said as bad or worse without anybody even suggesting censure. And others on other issues have said as bad or worse without any note of censure. And from a pure optics perspective, the United States House of Representatives just censured the only Palestinian American representative while this conflict is going on. That's a problem. Now, the only reason that I'm not going to spend any more time on this is, one, I've got a guest I want to get 10 times in the House, 9 times in the Senate. Censure doesn't really do anything. It doesn't carry any severe consequences with it. It is basically an official declaration that we're all saying this person shouldn't have said that or shouldn't have done that, but it doesn't come with consequences. And it may be the case that this censure can be spun ultimately as a good thing by waking us up to how we already know how divided we are, but how we're going to use the tools of the government to focus on various issues. When the concern is more about, she said something that the rest of us have problems with, some serious problems, some mild problems. When the focus is more on that, then what are we going to do? Are we just merely going to side with Israel nonstop, no matter what, with no end, which is what some people like Lindsey Graham have just flat out said, no matter what, we're with Israel. And I can tell you right now, that ain't true for me. That ain't true for a lot of people. And when we're asking and trying to push for a ceasefire, when we're trying to bring peace about somehow, and this is not some pie in the sky. I'm not sitting here saying, gosh, if only they'd stuff. I get it. I don't know what the solution is to this problem, but you've got Senator Bernie Sanders and others calling for a ceasefire. This may be machinations of political operatives where we need the president to say one thing, we need Bernie to say something else, we need a representative to say something else in order to stir up ideas so that we can better steer things, so that you can play good cop, bad cop, so that you can do whatever sort of manipulations you might be able to do to get a better outcome that doesn't just involve sending more weapons and saying we're going to support Israel no matter what. Israel's losing support, and some of it is from misinformation, and some of it is from ignorance, and some of it is because Israel's done things that we should be calling out. But when we're going to decide to censure one person in the government, and it's the only Palestinian American who, while she definitely said things that were problematic and also shared things that were false, or appear to be false, when that becomes the focus and we ignore similar problematic things from the other side or many other sides, I don't know that we're using our tools, including censure, correctly. There won't be any major consequences of this, other than, the public embarrassment and shame of having had your cohorts in the government come out and say, yeah, what you did doesn't represent us. And that's fine, because it definitely does not represent the rest of them. It represents someone who's hurt, who's close to the issue, who has a different perspective on it than others, and who desperately wants peace. Anybody who's trying to portray Representative Tlaib as someone who's looking for the extermination of Jews is lying. That is just obviously not the case. And to try to spin it that way is a problem. And somebody will clip something out of this and be like, oh, you said this. Hamas is a vile, disgusting terrorist organization that is to blame for the current situation that we find ourselves in. But I agree with Representative Tlaib that when I hear about dead children, I don't care if they were Palestinian or Jewish. We've got to do something. I don't know what. I'm not going to pretend what. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. But when we're focusing on censuring someone for carelessness and emotion at a time of heightened emotion, I think we've lost the script at that point. But I got a guest tonight who I mistakenly listed as a physicist because I had a physicist on, and I did the name change to change the name to Eve Was Framed, who's not a physicist, but is just as awesome as any physicist I know. So how you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on tonight. I'm excited to hopefully talk to some callers too.
My pleasure. We have some callers that are starting to line up. There's at least one in the queue, and we'll get some more here. I was noticing the crackling from your mic has restarted, but we'll
Oh no.
a little bit until we can find a break. How did you deal with the Supreme Court overturning Roe? Did you think that was something that was likely to happen, or had you been like, oh, that'll never change? people can keep trying, but it's not going to change.
Yeah. No, I fully expected it. I was raised to pray and fast and protest for that to happen. I grew up in a Christian nationalist environment, and then we had the rumors coming out that it was going to be overturned, and so I wasn't surprised, but I was still heartbroken because to me it was a sign that Christian nationalism and the influence that it's been working on achieving for years and years and years underground is working. It is accomplishing things, and that's always scary. I'm so excited about the election results yesterday because obviously that's a step in the right direction, but it's still scary.
Yeah. I mean, so we got some good news, and in a number of different places. I don't, obviously we end up talking about what my hangups are, but while we're waiting for the calls to queue up, I had told you I wanted to get you in here so we could catch up, find out what's going on, and maybe find out what your hang up is right now, because mine is God and the GOP, for sure. What have you been hung up on lately?
I've been hearing a lot about speaking of Christian nationalism, our Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
And that is mind blowing to me that he is in the position that he's in, and yet also not surprising. It's more sad news that the GOP is supporting and creating politicians like this at this point. He was asked what his worldview is because people obviously want to know what someone in his position think about the world, and he said, "Just read the Bible." That is terrifying. Like, what parts of the Bible are you implementing as your worldview, and why is that ever a good thing to anybody here in 2023? So I'm frustrated that we have somebody like that in that position, and other politicians that are known Christian nationalists, and I have Christians every day telling me that Christian nationalism doesn't exist or isn't a real threat. When we have that happening and we have the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which to me is only a religious issue, and so naturally we see Christian nationalists bringing up issues like abortion that shouldn't even be an issue.
Yeah, it's, I talked about, I did it. Well, I was going to say I did a debate this past weekend, but I didn't. I did the opening to a debate, and then I walked out because my debate opponent didn't come to actually address the topic at all and decided to spin things in a different direction. But in my opening, I specifically included things about Mike Johnson because, I mean,
Mm.
here's somebody who's written for Answers in Genesis and who is clearly homophobic, he and his wife have been scrubbing their social media and connections and things like that to make it harder for people to find some of the stuff that's problematic. But luckily, people, figured it out ahead of time. He's blamed mass shootings on the teaching of evolution. He's blamed abortion for the breakup of the family and for school shootings. He's written a "Don't Say Gay" bill outlawing any discussion of gender identity, sexual orientation, or related subjects for anyone under 10, which really frustrates me because this is always them doing the "we need to protect the kids, we need to protect the kids, we need to from the drag queens and the overtly sexual this and all this left-wing gender ideology." And then what they do is they write a bill, which thankfully this did not pass, but they go so far in what they're trying to do to protect things that this prevents kids under 10 from learning about and having the correct language that allows them to better report on and about sexual abuse and sexual assault, so that kids know, hey, he touched my cookie, isn't the language that we really need to address. You need to be able to speak about your genitals in a way that is, clear. Otherwise, and so his policy, which didn't pass, or his legislation, which didn't pass, would have put kids at greater risk and would have made it easier for abusers to get away with it. It's like once they get this ideological, I'm going to do what God wants me to do, nothing else matters. And so they don't care what the science is on this. They don't care what the science shows is the best way for us to actually protect kids and to actually convict child abusers.
Right. Yeah, as we know, the supposed Christian values, there's not a whole lot of Christ-like things about them. they have an agenda, and he claims that he's been ordained by God to be in this position. They're not even pro-democracy. They want God to make these decisions, not the rest of, the people that are supposed to be voting.
Yeah, he wants student-led prayer back in public schools.
Only for Christians. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, no. That's the first thing I was like, okay, Speaker, you want student-led prayer back in school? Does that mean satanic prayers, Jewish prayers, Islamic prayers? None of that's going to happen.
No, just their kind.
And the people who are telling you that there's no such thing as Christian nationalism, he's literally fine with acknowledging that he's a Christian nationalist. And so is his wife, and so are a number of other members of the government right now, especially in the far right wing of the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's scary. Well, I think we're going to see more and more of that, because with Trump being somebody that they now have to distance themselves from, they still need to pick something dogmatic and emotional to cling to for some of these things that they push, like anti-abortion and all of that. And so they have to lean into the Christian nationalism. That's going to be what comes up next, even more, I think, unfortunately.
So, because I don't necessarily think that I have a solution to this, nor are my thoughts the only ones that should represent a potential solution, where are we screwing up? And now maybe we're coming out from underneath some of our screw ups. Should we? And I don't mean to necessarily include you or anybody else like in the Democratic Party or whatever, but for progressively lefty minded people at all, I'm not going to be voting for Trump, and there's a good chance that right now he's going to be the nominee, unless he ends up in prison before then. And so when I look at the Democratic Party, just as a strategy for opposing Christian nationalists, for opposing that idea, do we stick with Biden? Do we try to convince Biden that you get somebody else, Gavin Newsom, somebody, or do we set aside this notion of let's pick our person and focus instead on state issues and making sure that, instead of 7 states that are codifying protections for abortion, we, have 43, so that the others end up being kind of like just swept in with it.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I'm not an expert either. I wish I knew an exact solution. I think focusing more on policy is, unfortunately, in the short term, kind of all we have. We don't have some amazing charismatic leader. The GOP has a million of these guys that are all like itching to be the next Trump, basically. And we don't have a whole lot of that happening on, quote, the other side, which I'm also deeply frustrated that there are these 2 sides that we have to pick from. And I also think the more lawsuits we have coming up out against states that continue to force these Christian nationalist legislature, the better. We have to start going back against these individual laws, I think. And I think that's unfortunately not going to help us very much in the short term, but it's all we have right now. And I wish there was something better to offer. And that's why I feel very frustrated. Even when we have good election days like yesterday, we still have Mike Johnsons everywhere.
Yep. Well, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. Calls are starting to line up. Okay, here's the deal. Tomorrow, the Transatlantic Call-In Show is going to air starting at 2 p.m. Central, so basically 4.5 hours before right now, with Aron and Katy. The Sunday show, it'll be me and Shannon Q. On Monday, Skeptalk will be hosted by Erica Gutzik-Gibbon. And Dying Out Loud next Tuesday with Dave at 6 Central. And I'll be back on the Hang Up next week with a return from J. Mike. before we get into the other stuff, let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do call-wise. Now, on the Sunday show and on many of the other shows, we focus primarily on religion. On this show, I will always give theistic callers priority. But on this show, I talk about whatever I'm hung up on, which tonight is clearly about politics and stuff. But I'm encouraging people, if you're going to call in and show your support for the GOP, or you have concerns about lefty stuff, or you're opposed to, if you're opposed to just like anything that I'm opposed to, or that you suspect Eva's opposed to, by all means, you can call in on those and we'll sort it out. The first call, though, my apologies, I did not. This is not a call that I think is necessarily a good thing, but I'm always going to be open to this stuff. And that is that we have someone, I think from chat perhaps, named Matt in Ohio, whose pronouns are he, him, who wants to talk to me about how I'm a bad example of how atheists should talk to theists. So welcome, Matt. What am I doing wrong?
You're very short with people. You don't have much, like, any ability to have patience, despite seeing the same thing. Like, one of your biggest things, in my opinion, that you bring up is that people are very dishonest with how they interact with you and when you ask a question. And while I do see that they're not answering your question, I think it's not that you have to shoulder all the burden, but it's more like, what's your objective? And when it comes to an objective, it just seems like you're ready to attack more than try to explain or help someone understand something.
Yeah, so your audio is really bad, but I think I cut part of it. What do you think my objective is?
Go away!
Were you yelling that at me?
I muted, and it sounds like the caller is driving, so this guy can kick it to the curb. We're good with him.
I love that he started that whole conversation off by not even saying hi or anything. He's tone policing you while being short.
Excuse me? Are you talking to me, Matt? Wow, and he hung up on me. So let me explain what happened, Matt. If you were yelling at somebody else, like if somebody else was bothering you in your car and distracting you, that's on you. But the irony of you calling to say that I don't have enough patience, I can't take you seriously, Matt. But I will address the sentiment behind what you're saying, because first of all, I've done this we're closing in on 20 years. And I have done it poorly on many occasions. And I think I've done it pretty well on some occasions. And what a lot of people confuse is what's my actual goal. Because a long time ago, I decided I'm not necessarily trying to convince the caller. I'm always going to make the points that I think should convince any reasonable person. And so I'm optimistic that a caller might become convinced. But I want to have the conversation with the caller, because I know that there are people out there listening who agree with the callers, and they're not in the spotlight. They're not under fire. And so when a caller says something that's ultimately embarrassing or is a really bad argument, that resonates with the person who's sitting at home. Their mirror neurons kick off of, man, I wouldn't want to be that, but that person has the same beliefs I do. So it forces them to think about what they believe and why. Do they have a better reason than this? And so on some front, I'm happy to use a caller to reach all the people that agree with that caller. The other thing is that I genuinely want to have the conversations, but I'm not interested in having time-wasting, useless conversations. Someone who calls in and says, well, I just believe because I believe. I just believe because, I've had experiences and I believe. And I believe because, I think it's a good reason to believe, and I think there's good evidence to believe. Okay, and I ask, what's the evidence? It's funny that Matt was pointing out that he thinks that I'm too short with the callers because I'll accuse him of being dishonest, and then he immediately had to acknowledge that they don't answer the questions that I asked. I'll ask a question and they don't answer it, and I'll ask it again, and they don't answer it, and I ask it again, and they don't answer it. And it's like, yeah, I noticed the you're angry, and then proceeds to scream. It's amusing, but it's a real issue. Whether or not Matt is just an absolute shithead troll that, once. By the way, I don't know if Matt's ever done this before, but if you haven't sat down and done, I don't know, somewhere between an hour and a half and 3 hours of live calls, being ready to be attacked, insulted, lied to by a whole bunch of people who really don't have either the ability or the interest in having a conversation at that level, I think you kind of underestimate the toll it takes on people, not the least of which is virtually everybody else who's tried to do this. None of them make it 20 years. I'll be surprised if I actually make it 20 years.
You're actually doing this.
No, I'll make it 20 years. But here's the thing is Matt called in and, ended up yelling and whatever else. What you don't realize, Matt, is if you think you have a better way, first thing I'm going to do is say, have you tried it? Because you can do this. You can go out and have these arguments or yes. That's number one. Number two is there are a lot of things that a lot of us, including me, intuitively think are a better way because that's how we've been taught. Hey, just put on a nicer face, try to politely guide them. You have the people who are advocating for street epistemology and things like that. Just ask the questions and, don't call them out for anything else. This feels like it's a better way. And that's because you're thinking about one-on-one interactions with people that you perhaps know and care about, or people who are honest interlocutors. It is fundamentally different. And this is something that took me a while to learn. Fundamentally different when you're doing a live show, taking calls from people who can be anonymous. You get prank calls. You get people who aren't serious. You get people who really have no business having these discussions, let alone having them in public. And when they're under fire like that and they begin to realize it, it makes things worse. And that's why in a number of situations, it'll be like, I'll just shut the call down rather than continue. Because despite what people think, I don't do this just to find ways to mock people. I left one of the two debates recently because, just to hang out. I left one of the two debates recently because there was nothing good that was going to come of it. And it was only going to be people mocking this person. And I didn't want to keep participating with that. But that said, do I think I'm the best at it? Yes. But I'm going to clarify that. I'm the best in the sense that I'm my favorite because I'm the one that says and does things generally the way I do. Do I think there are other people who are better at this stuff? Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, I told one of them so just last week because they were thanking me for learning things from me early on. And I was like, you're way better at this than I could have ever hoped to have been. And there's others. But when it comes to the debates, I'm the one that says things the way I want them said. So, of course, I'm going to be my favorite there.
Right.
But are there people who are going to be more effective? Perhaps. I don't know if I've seen them, though. I want to see. Yeah. If you've got data, cool. If you've got a better way, cool. If you just don't like me, that's fine, too. If you think I'm an asshole, you're right. On occasion, I'm an asshole and arrogant, all kinds of things. And on other occasions, I'm absolutely not. So if you try to summarize it all up as if I'm just awful across the board, I won't take you seriously, and neither should anybody else. But Matt, thanks for attempting.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'll get told by people that your method is, they disagree or they think it should be different, or they'll even say, I love that you're so nice and stuff. What they don't understand is me and most of my peers that do what I do, we all look to you, Matt, and we're like, we grew up as atheists by watching what you do and learning how to have these conversations. And just because we have different styles and different tones of voices and whatever we do, that is not what decides if what we do is effective or not. And the tone policing thing is very frustrating.
And for the people who think, I don't know, people who don't know me are going to think whatever they want. That's fine. I guarantee you, there's no one who's been a more thorough and honest critic of me than me. Mm-hmm. For years, I would leave every single episode of a show, and on my drive home afterwards, I would replay it in my head going, shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have said that. Definitely shouldn't have said that. Oh, why didn't you say this? What was that? Why'd you get this wrong? Oh my God, you should have said this. Now, this is what people are going to think, and just like at a neurotic level of beating myself up. That's how I've managed to do this for all the time, because there are some things that I almost never do now that I used to do much more frequently. Like last week, I called someone a moron and immediately had to retract and apologize. I should scrub that word from my lexicon, and I definitely don't want to do that. It was just sometimes you get to a frustration point. But in any case, we got calls lining up, and I want to take some of them.
Let's do it.
So Ken, who's an agnostic in Pennsylvania, the pronouns are he, him, has some, I guess questions on God stuff, but also I see something about taxation and jailing. And so, Ken, can we pick one topic to start with? Are you there, Ken?
My bad entirely. I muted the caller. You're going to have to start over from the beginning. It was because of the last guy. I had the thing muted, so just start over. Thanks.
Awesome.
All right.
Hey, Ken,
who am I talking to?
You're talking to Matt. Yes.
You sound like Jimmy.
Well, thank you.
All right.
But I'm not Jimmy. You're on with Matt and Eve.
Oh, okay. Oh, Matt there. All right. All right.
Yeah, it's my fucking show.
I guess.
Imagine that.
Am I on the air? I was watching your show there just now with some girl there, and you all were talking about the government stuff.
Yeah. Ken, this is Matt. You're on with Matt and Eve.
All right, Matt and Eve. Okay. Hi. How are you doing? All right.
Great.
First to begin. This might be a little kind of on the comical side, but what I was telling my daughter the other night that I have I know that God exists, all right, and you can see it with everybody that calls from that belonging to a religion, all right. So I told her that I was going to call you and let you know that God exists. I know God exists.
Okay, Ken.
Because
how do you know?
Ken, I'm going to let Eve address this, but it has you listed here as an agnostic and says you're unsure if there's a God. That's what the call screener said, and now you're saying you know that a God exists. So you've both claimed that you're not sure if a God exists, and that you know a God exists.
Well, what I told him exactly was that if God exists, I know that He exists. If He does, if He doesn't, well, I don't know. So I'm kind of like in between. You understand what I'm trying to say?
No, not even in the fucking slightest. But I'm gonna even ask you. How
all right, okay, all right. Well, what I was saying, I really called to tell you my mind on.
Right. No, hang on. I'm going to mute you. Listen, because I want Eve to get her question in and get it answered. You said that you know that God exists, and Eve had asked you, how do you know that God exists? So can you explain? Can you explain how you know God exists?
All right. By the people that call you, the religious people that talk to you on the line. I've been listening to you for a few months now. All right? My wife died, and I can't sleep in the night, so I watch your all shows all night for about, 10, 11 hours, from about 11 o'clock until 7 next morning, and that's when I fall asleep. I sleep 2 hours, I wake up and I can't sleep again. So I go do stuff in the garage, wherever. I do a little bit of stuff. And when I don't have anything to do, or I can't make noise and wake up the neighbors, I listen to you guys, you and Jimmy and Forrest and the rest of them. So the people that call you...
Can I interrupt you for just a second? Do you think there is a God, yes or no?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, then my question is different because you originally said you do know there's a God. Did you used to think there was a God and now you're questioning that?
Well, I've been questioning it for quite a while now. All right. As I told the guy that scanned me there, that took my name and stuff, I didn't do anything wrong. My wife and I and my daughter, I think we are the best people in the whole world. All right. Yeah, people say, the sin. I don't remember sinning ever. All right. Because if God made me the way I am, if I did anything so-called wrong, which I don't know, it's his fault. It's not my fault. So therefore, I never did sin. Okay, so anyway, the people that call in, the religious people, I think if you look at them, you will see the evidence of God is alive and well, because they're real assholes, and God is an asshole, so he made assholes. And those of us who we didn't make, we just evolved. And there are those who was created, those who I'm talking about.
Okay, I'm doing my best to try to understand exactly where you're going. And so it seems that you're talking about, if God exists, then he made you, which means you're operating as he made you, and that means you couldn't possibly sin, and that God is an asshole.
He didn't make me. I evolved. Those people that call into you, the religious people, he made those. He didn't make me.
Okay, so I promise. I think there's, I don't know, maybe some sort of language barrier here, but if a God existed, then he made all of us, right?
No, not according to how I think.
Okay.
I evolved. Okay.
So you think that you evolved? Hang on. You think that you evolved, but that a God exists and made other people, so they didn't evolve?
No, they were made by God. Like an avocado tree
and yet
would bear avocados.
Hang on.
Or a dog will have dogs.
Hang on.
Or a bird would have birds.
Stop talking. Hang on.
Well, okay, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Just stop talking. Once you figure out that I've asked you to stop talking, just stop and talk. I'll give you a spot afterwards. So you're saying you evolved, and a God created other people, and he made those other people so that they are genetically compatible with you?
No, they're genetically compatible with him.
No, if they're humans, we're all compatible.
Yeah, but there are two types of humans.
No,
those of us who you listen to me now.
No,
there are two types of humans. As far as I'm concerned, there are two types of.
I think I won't actually listen to you. As a matter of fact, I'll mute you. I'm going to take you off mute, and I'm going to let you tell me what you think the two types of humans are and how you know this to be true. And that's all I really care about at this point. So I'm going to take you off mute. Please tell us, what are the two types of humans and how you know that there are those two types?
All right. You ready?
Been ready.
All right. The two types of humans. There are those of us who evolved, and there are those who God made, who were created. All right, those of us who evolved, we are the smarter ones, and those that God made are assholes, the stupid. Right? I listen to them carefully. They're really stupid.
Okay, Ken. Right now, you sound really stupid. So should I assume that you were created by God?
I wasn't created by God.
How do you know? Because when I asked you to describe the two groups of people and how you knew, you said one group evolved and the other one was created by God. And you know this because the ones that were created by God sound stupid. Well, right now you sound incredibly stupid, which would lead me to believe that you were created by God.
Well, this I have been thinking this for a few months, and this is what I came up with. Okay.
Cool. It's pretty stupid.
I
Goodbye.
can't be.
So
Oh my God.
it's frustrating to me because I used to be a Christian. I was a evangelical, fundamentalist, Southern Baptist Christian. My IQ didn't go up when I stopped believing.
Right.
Matter of fact, it's probably gone down fairly consistently because that's just the way IQ tends to operate. Not that I give a shit about IQ, but you could make an argument that I'm colloquially smarter about a great many things than I was in the past. I know more about many
Right.
things because we continue to learn as we age and grow, hopefully. And I'm an obsessive learner. But there's also plenty of things I've forgotten. And there's things that I'm not as quick of a thinker on some areas as I used to be. My chess game has struggled terribly lately. But if you suggest that there's one group of people that evolved and another group of people that were created by God, and those are the stupid ones, what conclusion am I supposed to reach? I don't sit around saying Christians or theists or deists or any of them that they are stupid. I might ridicule the ideas that they have, and on occasion I've fucked up
Right.
and said that somebody was a moron or whatever. But if you're just calling in to say, I don't think there's a God, but I think there's a God that created the people who are stupid and assholes, I don't know what that solves.
Right. I talk about this a lot. It's also frustrating because it removes responsibility from the theist, from the person you're having a conversation with. If they're just stupid, why are we even having this conversation? Some of the most brilliant people I know happen to believe in a God, and some really stupid sounding people are atheists. And neither of those dictates whether you your IQ, like you said, doesn't dictate whether you believe or not. That's just that's such a strange place that he landed. And the problem is he said, this is what I came up with. You can't just sit and lie in bed at night and try to come up with the answers to the world. That's where you end up, is thinking that. I've never heard that one, though. I will say that that God created some humans and some of us evolved. That's new.
I don't think this was. So here's the thing: is that every time there's a call like this, there are people in chat who are like, "Oh, this is a troll. This is a troll. They can't be serious." Don't get me wrong. I understand why some of you think that, and it could be correct. It could have been someone just absolutely unserious about everything, just engaged in some mockery for fun. That's going to happen. It's happened a lot. You're not going to do a call-in show for years and years and not have quite a bit of that. The thing is, in most cases, I don't know how to tell the difference between someone who's trying to parody what people actually believe and the people who actually believe that. In this case, it was considerably different, and it was logically contradictory. And the only way that I could make it make sense is to say, here's someone who's incredibly frustrated. And if we take him at his word, isn't getting much sleep and has been listening to all the callers to the show and has just decided, maybe as an amusement, well, yep, here we go. There's a Bill Hicks joke. And I'm going to butcher it because I haven't listened to it in years, but it's about a creationist trying to argue with Bill Hicks and suggestion, calling Bill out for believing evolution and saying, no, I believe God created me. And Bill's like, well, yeah, looks like you rushed it. It's and so I think the most charitable I could be would say the caller's trying to do what Bill Hicks was doing, which was basically saying, Bill Hicks is actually at the beginning kind of quote was, isn't it funny? Isn't it strange how the people who don't believe evolution look really unevolved? And that's That's Bill Hicks' take on it, is to go after them. They look inbred, or they look like, God rushed it a bit, or all these things. And if I were to be as charitable as possible to the caller, I think I'd have to say that perhaps they were doing something like that, and just the lack of sleep has put them in a position where they now sound incredibly stupid. But if you're going to mock people and call in and say other people are stupid and then get it wrong, you are now fair play.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
We got, if you want to do another reset, I'll start talking with this caller. Dave in DC is an agnostic theist. Pronouns are he, him. Hey, Dave, how are you? And what's your question?
How are you doing? I just have a question for you. Love you guys. Just figured out, just started listening to you and learning. I'm sorry. Oh, and learning so much from you, which is awesome. Just wondering, and I say this in the most respectful way, what's the purpose of trying to reason with theists when there's obviously no proof? It's only faith. What's the reason behind continuously doing it?
Well, one of the things is that I've debated a lot of people, including some serious theologians, who don't think it's all faith. They think that they have evidence, and they think that they have evidence-based arguments for it. And so if in fact there is evidence for a God, I'd like to know. If there's a good reason to believe in a God, I think it's the most important thing you could possibly know. And rather than run around arrogantly assuming I've evaluated every claim and every evidence and can come to the conclusion that nobody can know, which I think is one of the silliest things that some quote, quote, agnostics do. I want to keep having the conversation, because if I'm wrong, I'd like to know. If they have evidence, I'd like to know. And if they don't have evidence and they're as confused as I was for all the years that I believed, I'd like to explain to them why I don't share that belief and help them stop believing, because belief has consequences. And we live in a world where a good chunk of people not only believe in a God, but they're going to vote and legislate on behalf of that God. And a good chunk of those think that God really wants them to control who other people love or marry or have sex with, or whether or not abortion's legal, and all of those things. So belief has consequences, and I care about the truth.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you have repeated that answer so many times, and I'm sorry I've just recently come upon you, and I really appreciate that response. I don't really have anything else to add. I mean, I do believe in God, but
Which God?
It's complete faith. I wouldn't be surprised if there was God. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't God. But I continue to believe. But I agree with everything you just said. Completely agree. It's horrifying. It's horrifying what most theists are, the voting and all that stuff. Horrifying to me. So yeah, I was just curious what the interest is in continuously doing that. But I guess I found out my answer.
I don't know if you want my opinion too, or my answer, which is a little bit different than Matt's. I mean, it's the same as Matt's as well. Yeah, but also another reason I have is I used to believe, and I experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse while I was believing, because of the things that I was believing. And so when I engage with theists now, I engage with them knowing that atheists used to engage with me, and it got me to the point that I am now, which is finally living a life that I feel is my own, that brings me joy, and I want to see others have the opportunity to experience that as well. And so it's humanizing them to engage as well, and I think that's important, and it breaks down the us versus them, because if I wasn't even willing to engage, if I wasn't even willing to have these conversations, then I'm practicing the same moral superiority that they are, and that's not something I subscribe to.
I relate 100% to that, because I also have sustained a lot of trauma. I'm in my 50s now, but I've sustained a lot of trauma, both when I was young, grew up Jewish, and was told I'm going to hell because I went to college in a school in Texas. And, years and years of trying to figure out what is wrong with all these people. And so, yeah, and then sort of my search has brought me to this point. I hear what both of you are saying very loud and clear. I have a better understanding of what the purpose of the show is, and I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
totally.
Dave. I have a question. You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer anything. You can hang up now if you want to. But you said you believe in a God based entirely on faith, and I have one question to start with, which is, which God do you believe in?
No God in particular.
Just
it's pretty loose.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just, like a lot of the theists say when they call in, you walk outside and you're like, wow, that's their proof of God. That's not my proof of God, but it does make me wonder, wow, there very well could be some kind of something out there, not really God, just something out there that I believe that there is something else going on that we just have no idea. That's what I believe. There's something else going out there that we don't know, we haven't found. What's going on? That's kind of what I believe.
Except that if we don't know that there's what's going on, then you can't know that there's anything going on. Which now I'm singing a song from the 80s. I know there's something going on. It's strange to me, and I get it, David. I'm not gonna beat you up over this. I mean, you're an agnostic theist with a vague God that you wouldn't be surprised to find out exists or doesn't exist, and it's like, oh, you look out and yeah, there could be something, except that you don't know that. And if I pressed you on it, I'm sure you would acknowledge, yeah, I have no way of knowing that there even could be something. I have no way of knowing that any of the gods I might entertain are even possible, let alone actually there. It's just you, like many other people, are terrified. Well, maybe terrified is not necessarily the right word, but you're unwilling to rule it out because you think that if you don't believe in it, you've said, oh, that's impossible. And yet the reality is you don't believe. You neither believe in a God nor believe there is no God. You are talking, even when I asked you about it, about the possibility of a God, or there might be, or there seems like there's something, but we can't know what it is and all this. It is a way of staying connected to the people who think they've seen or detected something beyond us somewhere out there, staying connected with them, and keep your foot also in the crowd of reason who might be objecting it. It's something that I would have called cowardly once upon a time. I think I have a better understanding of it where cowardly might still apply in some people's circumstances, but what difference does it make whether I or anybody else thought it was cowardly? I at least understand why people might vacillate between, is it possible? Do I wish there was a God? All those things just kind of meandering around, because as long as you don't have to actually commit to anything, it's no skin off your back.
Right. Especially because nothing's been proven.
Yeah. But so the atheist position, by the way, is not, we've proved there is no God. It's also not, we know for sure there is no God. It's also not, we know there's no God. Theism is being convinced that a God exists. Atheism is not being convinced that a God exists. And so it seems like if you're not convinced that a God exists, you're an atheist. But if you think that from time to time you're like, oh, there could be something possible, I don't want to rule it out, then it just seems like you're skeptical in the not really understanding and using modern scientific skepticism. You're doubtful, and that's okay.
That would sum me up. I think that would sum me up. Yeah,
cool.
A lot of thinking about it throughout all the years. A lot of thinking about it, and just there's no
if
answer.
that changes. If that changes, if either you find a good reason to actually believe in some God, by all means call in and let me know, because I'd love to know about it. And if you find that your identity or the way you talk about it or look about it or think about it or categorize yourself changes, call in and let us know about that too.
Okay. I really appreciate your time, and this is very thoughtful. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Have a good night.
Have a great day. You too.
All right. Well, we still we still don't have a theist caller. But I'm not even going to read my apologies. First of all, so Devin in Indiana, pronouns are he, him. I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. I'm going to mute you. You are live. I'm only muting you because I wanted to get you live, so I didn't skip it. My apologies to the call screeners or call screener. But by the way, in addition to the announcements about TACIS tomorrow is at 2 p.m. with Aron and Katy, I'll be on the Sunday show with Shannon Q. Awesome. Eric is hosting Skeptalk on Monday. Dave's on Dying Out Loud on Tuesday. I'll be back on Hang Up next week with J Mike. Huge thank you to all of our mods and call screeners. And I put this call through without actually reading all of the content that the call screener bothered to type in there. And the call screener, don't get me wrong, Devin, I'm not necessarily going to hold you to this, but the call screeners wrote, Mike Johnson's financial statements don't show the usage of any bank accounts, and he uses a religious accountability app to keep track of his behavior and wants to know the host thoughts, wants to share about a Democratic sweep in his hometown. Okay, that's the first time I've actually read all the information the call screener put in there. And whoever's call screening, thank you for doing an amazing job in getting all that information in there. But I just saw Devin and I saw Mike Johnson, and I was like, oh, we're taking that right now. So, Devin in Indiana, you've got questions for us about Mike Johnson. You're on with Eve and Matt. How are you?
I'm good. First time caller. Very nervous. I got my 4-month-old here right with me, so if she wakes up and starts talking, at least you know what that is. So those are kind of two separate things. The first thing is that all of his financial disclosures that he's put out show no bank accounts at all. So it's just kind of a little bit suspicious, a lot of people are saying. I just wanted to get your opinion on that, first of all.
Yeah, I find it a little bit suspicious. But I know a lot of people I'm definitely suspicious. I mean, I got a bank account, and our business has a bank account. I'm assuming Eve has a bank account. Almost everybody I know has some kind of bank account, but you don't necessarily have to have one.
In it, but it's there.
It's also possible that for people who've changed jobs, especially people who've been lawyers and worked, it could be that, I know sometimes couples have one account, and it could be that, maybe they've got one account for their family that's in his wife's name, not his. But I don't know. I'm sure it's weird enough that I think somebody's probably going to look into it.
Yeah, it sounds also like a very fundy thing to do, a Dave Ramsey type, like have no debts, have no bank accounts kind of thing. So that's not that shocking. You mentioned the covenant eyes thing too, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. So that was another thing he's talked about in sermons in the past. This, I guess you called it the covenant app. I couldn't remember what it was called. But it basically scans his phone for anything that I guess if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be looking at. Any kind of key phrases, websites, pictures, even it scans the phone itself and sends a report every week. Or if it picks up anything that he shouldn't be looking at, to his buddy, accountability buddy, which in his case was his son, which is kind of strange in itself. But
yeah, I thought that was strange too.
The problem is
the real problem.
Yeah, the real problem is like who is able to see those on the other side, who runs that app, who knows what else he's looking at that isn't necessarily bad for him to look at as a Christian, but would be a security risk.
So I'm glad you brought this up. So for those who don't know, there's a clip, and you can find it, even though they took several versions of this clip down. There's at least some still up there. Hemant Mehta's reported on it. By the way, Hemant Mehta is the best of all of us, and is absolutely, I don't know. I feel like he should be tithing to Hemant for all the work that he's done to help all of us over the years. Just an outstanding, the finest atheist journalist I could imagine. So Hemant reported on it because this app is basically, hey, it was designed for, like men in the church to be accountable to each other, to stay away from porn. And so you put the thing on your phone and on your computer and this other stuff. And if it finds you anything suspicious, it sends those things to your accountability buddy. And if some of them, it's not even just, oh, this is suspicious. If it's anything where it knows that you've been to a porn site or whatever else, it'll just send that directly to your accountability button. Now, it's already a little weird. And yeah, Devin, I think you brought up a great point. I thought about part of your point, but not this, which is who's running that app and who's monitoring every bit of porn that Mike Johnson's ever looked at. Because if it turns out that Mike likes a particular type of porn that might be, I don't know, not looked on as a stereotypical heterosexual dude and a Christian dude might stumble across, that's potential blackmail now for the Speaker of the House. And I think there's quite a bit of blackmail that perhaps has gone on in our government anyway. But somebody in chat mentioned something that I thought of the other day, and that is Mike Johnson's accountability partner at the time that he talked about this was his 17-year-old son, which means
wow,
that if Mike looked at porn, it would automatically send a copy of that porn to his underage son to let him see whether or not Mike had violated that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you guys know who else had covenant eyes? Josh Duggar, who they later found child pornography on his computer. So it clearly isn't that effective also.
Actually, I might have to retract that. I said Josh Duggar raped his sisters. I'm not sure if that was actually the conclusion. I know that he had, I think the sexual assault charges against some of his sisters, I think, were included. But in any case,
he's in prison right now for child porn.
Yeah, he's in prison for child porn. But I'd also heard that he might have. I don't want to say, oh, he raped his sisters, and then turn out I'm wrong, and then I get sued. So go look up Josh Duggar and find out just how awful he is. But yeah, he had covenant eyes. The thing is, it's really easy to avoid. And if you want to look great, like I could put covenant eyes on this computer right here, and I could make every fan of this show my accountability partner, and you all would never, there'd be nothing. There's no porn on this computer. There's no surfing of porn on this computer. You would think Matt's never looked at porn in his life if you looked at this computer. If you looked at another computer, you would be like, God damn, dude. But I think there's a real issue there of saying, if the app sends like a screenshot of any porn that you might have looked at to your accountability partner, and your accountability partner is an underage person, that might be illegal.
It should be.
The other issue I was thinking about was who in the administration side of the app goes through that stuff. If it's just an algorithm, fine. But if he's using his phone for work text and emails, he's the speaker. He's getting very high security information probably through his phone. Is anybody seeing that? That shouldn't be.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that should be up to, we've had a lot of problems with people in the government not using proper security protocols, everybody from Hillary to Donald Trump to Joe Biden. And so it's probably this is it's a little bit comforting, because it's how I remain fairly confident that there aren't the massive global conspiracies of epic proportions, because these people are inept, and nobody, I mean, you can point to the ones, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and Lauren Boebert, the grandma getting felt up at Beetlejuice. Good for her. I got no problem with the fact that she's having fun. It was the hypocrisy, the lying, and then, making anything about it in public. And nobody cares. Nobody's holding any of these people accountable. That's one of the reasons why I talked about the censure of Representative Tlaib is not going to have an impact. Nobody's going to remember it. It's a blemish on her record that maybe will be worn as a badge of honor somewhere down the road. Maybe not, but maybe. But yeah, there's a lot of issues with this guy. The bank account's one thing. The the accountability app thing with a 17-year-old as your accountability partner. By the way, I'm pretty sure the average 17-year-old dude could put the accountability software on his phone and still watch massive amounts of porn without anybody fucking knowing.
100%.
My main thing with Mike Johnson, though, is we don't even have to get conspiratorial or start guessing about these sort of things. He's saying it. He's saying my worldview is the Bible. He's saying that God ordained him. Like, that's already so wildly inappropriate to have somebody in office that believes those delusional things.
Yeah. Believe them, but don't implement them. Yeah.
We're going to have to wait a while, though, Mike. I'm sorry. We're going to have to wait a while, though, Devin, for people to look into Mike a little bit deeper and everything else. But I share some of your concerns.
Oh, yeah.
I got to move on because we're on a tighter time thing today. But thanks for bringing this up and reminding me, because I would have forgotten with all the other things that's going on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more quick thing. Some of the good elections that happened across the country. I just wanted to say I live in a kind of a big city in southern Indiana, and we actually had a Democrat sweep in this election yesterday, and that was very, very good to see.
That is awesome. I'm looking forward to more of it. But thanks so much for calling, Devin.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you. You too. Bye.
Yeah, it's I don't want to think that we're in any way out of the woods, or that we're likely to get Democratic sweeps left and right. By the way, Republicans won in Mississippi, although I don't think that's going to come as a surprise to anybody. Texas will flip before Mississippi does. That's my prediction. And actually, I should say Texas will flip back because we've had Democratic governors before. I'm sure Mississippi has too, but maybe back when the Democrats were the terrible ones. Boom. We have a bunch more callers, and we've got theists calling in. So John in Pennsylvania pronounces him as a theist with a general argument about a non-specific God, which I got to tell you, John, normally I'd be a little frustrated in saying, wow, we're going to deal with a general argument for a non-specific God. But honestly, at this point, just tell me, I'm going to ask you to specify your non-specific God, but I only mean that in the sense of we need some kind of minimal definition of the God you're talking about and why you think it's believable. But welcome to the show.
Oh yeah, my point was, yes. I just didn't want to get into like a debate about like the Bible or different religions. My God is a supreme being, the creator of the universe. That's the God I'm talking about.
And have you got just like one argument for that you want to go over?
Yeah, I was just more thinking of your thoughts on some of the main ones. I hear a lot of theists call on that are jabbering all types of stuff. I think there's some pretty good arguments when you look at
John,
the cosmological argument.
John.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting us to go through like a list of arguments to tell you what our thoughts are, I got 20 years of content out there and I've gone through arguments all over the place. I'm more interested in like, what argument do you find most convincing? And then we can discuss that.
Okay. I think like a design argument is probably the most convincing for me. But my point was that I think it's more of the ensemble of arguments that is what kind of drives me to believe that there probably is a God.
Okay. So design style arguments come in a bunch of different forms, quite often making use of the anthropic principle to suggest that the universe appears as if it was made for us. And yet what we know from, for example, evolution is that we were designed by a process that is unthinking. We're what happens in this universe. It's kind of like Douglas Adams' famous quote about a puddle gaining consciousness and realizing that the crevice in which it is resting was perfectly designed for him and fits his every curve and form and everything else. We're what evolved given this. What makes you think that it was designed for us?
Yeah, I'm not sure if design for us is the argument I would use. I've heard of that, and I've heard it framed like this from a lot of atheists. So like the puddle argument, I've heard that I just think like what we.
To be fair.
Okay, I'll start like from. Can I just speak a bit on the topic?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to be fair, atheists are responding to design arguments from God. But go ahead.
Okay, so hopefully I can make a point that's a bit. So I would say like starting with the dawn of the scientific revolution. I mean, it looks to me that a lot of those great scientists, Newton, Max Planck, a bunch of other ones that kicked off the scientific revolution, study nature because they thought it was intelligible and that they could rely on the human mind. So you need those presuppositions to do modern science. And those guys are theists. And then I think what we've learned about the cosmos and life with the DNA code, I think it makes more sense with the creator. And I don't think we can find, I think the probability of life happening is just so low with an unguided process.
How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, can I ask you a question?
Well, sure, if you want to make an assertion and just let it linger there without justifying it, go ahead.
Well, I just want to, what do you think about like that general idea of modern science arising from some of these theist thinkers?
So it's undeniable.
Like, how do you...
Are you going to ask, you're going to let me answer the question or not?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So it's undeniable that many of the scientists, especially during the dawn of modern scientific models, were theistic. And yes, they looked at nature because they thought, as you said, nature is intelligible, but that means that we can make sense of it. Now, many of them were looking for God, but none of them found God. And now, in the modern realm of scientists, particularly amongst the scientific elite, the overwhelming majority do not believe in any sort of personal God at all. So if you're going to say, well, Newton and Planck believed it, so therefore there must be a good reason, well, why not look at all the modern scientists now and point out that the overwhelming majority of them don't believe it, so maybe it's more reasonable that we shouldn't believe it. But at the end of the day, it's not like Newton or Planck found evidence for God. The God idea is ultimately unfalsifiable. All they did was fail to falsify the unfalsifiable. But we did learn more about the universe, and we learned more about biology and physics and cosmology and all that stuff. The presuppositions that are involved that allow science to run, to make good inferences and good inductive reasoning, don't require or rely on any sort of God. So your claim about the scientists believing God is irrelevant to whether or not there's a God or a good reason for it. The intelligibility of the universe is irrelevant to whether or not there's a God or good reason for it. And whether or not we need to presuppose that the universe is intelligible is also irrelevant to whether or not there's a God or good reason for it. That a good enough rebuttal?
Yeah, I mean, I get your point. I'm not. It's not like I'm arguing that because scientists believe a certain thing about God, we should. I don't think science can prove or disprove God, but I think findings about science make belief in God a lot more reasonable. The digital code of the DNA, for instance, the fact that the universe probably had a beginning.
Hang on. When you say the findings of science, make God way more believable, how do you explain how few scientists, particularly among those who understand the science best, how do you explain how few of them believe in a God if understanding the science makes God more reasonable? Are the scientists just unreasonable?
So now you're saying belief. You're saying a scientist. You're making the same argument you were critiquing me of, though.
No, sir. I'm responding to your claim that a proper understanding of the science makes God more believable. When you say that, then you should take a look at the people who understand the science the best and see how many of them share your conclusion that a proper understanding of science leads to God. Because the people who understand the science best do not share your conclusion that a good understanding of science leads to God. Your argument is flawed.
No, I know there's many scientists who don't believe in God. There's also plenty that do.
No, sir.
So yeah, I more want to hear what you think of it, and not just say the scientists.
I just told you what I think.
What do you think of?
Your argument is flawed for the reason I just pointed out.
but I'm looking at like discoveries in the science. I've read arguments about it. It doesn't convince me that many scientists don't drive that conclusion. I'm not saying science proves or disproves God.
What percentage of scientists in the National Academy of Scientists believe in a personal God?
I think it's 7%, sir.
7%. Now,
I don't think that's a good argument for what?
Hang on. You know why you'd think it was if you'd stop telling me that you don't think it's a good argument before I've actually made it, that'd be really impressive. So let's assume that you're corrected, and 7% of scientists in the National Academy of Sciences believe in a personal God. Are the other 93%, do they understand the science better than you do?
Yes, I'm not saying I'm smarter than PhD level.
No, I get it. So the 93% of scientists in your own thing all understand the science better than you do and better than I do. It's clear that they don't think, it's clear that this 93% don't think that science points to a personal God, and yet you do. Now, just looking at it, without any other information.
First of all, where do you get the personal God from? I never argued for a personal God in this conversation.
That's the question I specifically asked, and you answered.
Oh, I must have misunderstood. I'm just arguing for a God, the creator of the universe.
Well, I asked, okay, so would we agree, without digging through a bunch of statistics, that amongst the world's scientists if we took every scientist who understands the relevant sciences better than you or I do, what percentage of those agree with you that science leads to a God? Because some of the people who believe in a God and who understand the science still don't think that science points to a God. They just believe in a God for other reasons, right?
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think
I mean,
there's many sociological reasons. I don't want to get into that of why people believe in what they do in the 21st century.
So, wow, we got to make a fucking adjustment to the audio where people can actually hear us when they're talking. So, of all the scientists who understand the science best, what percentage of them agree with your conclusion that science points to God? You can just give an estimate. I'm not asking you to look it up.
I think it's about 10%, if I had to guess.
Sure. Why do you think the other 90%, in your estimation, don't agree with you? Are they wrong about the science?
No. There are arguments that modern understandings of evolution are not great, but there's plenty of people that believe in theistic evolution.
Yeah, literally nothing you said was in any way addressed what I was asking.
I don't find the argument that 90% of scientists don't believe in a God like convincing point that science doesn't point to God.
So, okay, you just said that you don't find the fact that 90% of scientists don't think that science points to God convincing that science doesn't point to God. So you think that science points to God and that 90% of the scientists who know the science better than you do are wrong.
No, I don't think that. I'm not going to say they're wrong.
You did. Okay. Can we agree that either the science points to a God or it doesn't?
I think there are. You can.
This is a yes or no question. 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 There are no other options. Can we agree that the science either points to a God or it doesn't?
Yeah, I think so, but I think most scientists
it has to be
either way.
John, just fucking yes or no when we're doing this, because it has to be. That's the basics of logic. Is something is either A or not A. Science either points to God or it doesn't point to God. That is an exhaustive, all-inclusive, only two fucking options. I asked the simplest yes or no question. All I needed was that. So now for the question, does science point to God? You think the answer is yes. And the overwhelming majority of people who understand the science better than you think the answer is no. Please explain that disparity in conclusion.
I think a big part of that, if I didn't want to really get into this, I more wanted to think why you think the science doesn't point to God, without references. But I'll say why I don't think many scientists believe in God or think science might point to God is because there's this rift that science, if there's an explanation that's not natural, that you can't even entertain that idea, even if the evidence might point to that.
Thank you.
So, like,
listen to me. Thank you.
Because that's so taboo in modern science.
Thank you. Thank you. Stop and listen. If science cannot point to the supernatural, if science cannot appeal to the supernatural, if science cannot conclude the supernatural, listen to me. Science uses methodological naturalism. You're not allowed to appeal to the supernatural. You're not allowed to conclude the supernatural. We have no way of investigating the supernatural. Science, by its very nature, cannot point to the supernatural. And that's the statement that you were just making.
I think science, the ultimate goal of science is to get the truth. Science can't study the supernatural, but it can see things in the natural world, order the digital code in DNA, and point to something that might not be natural.
No, sir.
If they can detect it, then it is natural.
No, sir. The only thing that science can do is either create a model that confirms something or fail to confirm it. So we either know how DNA works and it's natural, or we have a natural explanation for it, or we don't have a natural explanation. That does not mean the fact that we don't currently have a natural, we do, by the way, but for any given proposition.
I know what DNA is.
Listen,
okay? And how
listen, or I will fucking mute you. For any given issue that science addresses, we explore it. And if we find a natural explanation, that becomes the scientific natural explanation. At no point has science ever found or confirmed any supernatural explanation, and it currently cannot. Our failure to find a naturalistic explanation does not mean that the correct explanation is supernatural, right?
Yes, I don't. Can I just speak for a bit now? Because I'm having trouble hearing you, I think, when I'm speaking.
Okay, I've muted you. I want to make sure that we're clear on this because you have contradicted yourself now a couple of times. Because when I asked you to explain the disparity between all of the scientists who know and understand the science better than you do, who don't agree with your conclusion that it points to the God, it's like if all of the mechanics in the world investigated my car, 90% of them concluded that my transmission was bad. And you, who are not a mechanic, who don't know my car as well as they do, are saying, I don't think they've reached the right conclusion. And all I asked was for you to explain that disparity. And you explained that science can only explain the natural. And I acknowledge that because that's all we can do is investigate. And if we don't come up with a natural explanation, that doesn't mean that a supernatural explanation is there. So all I was trying to get you to do was explain the disparity between your conclusion about science and the scientist's conclusion about science. Now you can explain that however you want.
Okay, I get your point. I'm not seeing, it might sound like I was proposing a God of the gaps argument. I don't mean that at all. I think science should always try to fill the gaps in our knowledge. My point was that certain findings about science make, I'll call it a God hypothesis, more likely. And I think a lot of scientists just don't consider that because it's taboo in the modern age.
Okay.
What's that?
No, as soon as you say that, we're done. I mean, I definitely just listen. I'm still talking. I definitely want to get even here. And, this shouldn't just be you and me doing back and forth, but your hypothesis for why you and scientists the overwhelming majority of scientists have reached a different conclusion about whether it points to God, is you think that they're biased because of a taboo. And okay, cool. But how would you ever demonstrate that?
I mean, I can't demonstrate that now, but there's plenty of arguments for why that's the case in modern science.
Yeah. This is a huge dose of copium that you just dished out for yourself. I don't think it is.
I don't think you're actually
I do think it is, and I'm explaining to you that when 90% of the world's experts on science, 90% of the world's fucking experts on auto mechanics think that X is not indicated, and you, who are not an expert on either, come in and suggest that it is indicated and that they're biased because of a social taboo, you're dealing copium straight into your vein.
No, I think there's many reasons, but I'm just saying that's probably one of them.
Co-parter.
No, you co-parter.
Okay, you co-parter. You want to throw anything back at me since you can't come up with an actual argument or evidence and you won't acknowledge that you're not an expert, that you don't know what the hell you're talking about, but you want to suggest that 90% of the world's scientists are just afraid to come out against the social taboo? That there's a massive global conspiracy throughout the entire history of science where it recognizes, hey, we can't confirm the supernatural. And you're like, yeah, but where's your Nobel Prize, Coper?
Right.
Oh, he ran away.
Oh, bummer. I had questions.
Yeah, because I really wanted to, like, genuinely, I know you were fixing a mic thing and then we got into it and I was like, but so the design, so maybe I'll just let you go here with this on the science thing. Science is limited so far to addressing the natural world and coming up with naturalistic explanations. To suggest that science points to a God is to inject something not natural into something that's limited to the natural. Science can't say there's no God. When you were a believer, what was your take on science and was it a conspiracy? Were the world's elite scientists just out to shut down any God stuff?
Yeah, that's what I had been taught and indoctrinated with, that there was a conspiracy. And then I eventually progressed to like an old Earth, God started the Big Bang and let things go from there. Sort of conspiracy. But yeah, I'm just not sure why that's the argument and why that's the route he was going. So I wanted to ask, because he said that he doesn't believe in a personal God, and I guess the only argument he was making was toward a God that creates, but he was arguing as somebody who does believe a little bit more than just a creator God, because you would have to, in order for me to believe that there's a God, but it's not personal or one of these religious God, it's just like a creator God, science would have to provide something for me. And he's admitting that it doesn't, while also trying to argue that it does. I honestly wasn't understanding his argument fully, and that's what I wanted to ask him more about, because I think you kind of have to go hard into like, well, everything's a conspiracy, and therefore, why is he even calling to talk to you about this? Because clearly we're just believing in this conspiracy. Or you concede that you just have faith that this God exists, and there's not evidence of it.
To be fair, he didn't say that he didn't believe in a personal God. He said that he didn't raise a personal God.
That argument. Okay.
Yeah. He was desperately trying to avoid it. And that's probably wise, because if in fact he's like, go ahead.
Yeah. His original question was asking you what was it exactly? How did he word it? Why do you think science doesn't point to a God? And that is just such a weird, I already have major problems with that question. Why do you think science doesn't point to insert wild claim here? Like, because it's not giving me reasons to believe that it does. I just think it's a dishonest question to start with.
Yeah. Science isn't pointing to a God because it can't. If a God is something that is not natural, Science can't currently point to it. Science isn't pointing to a God for the same reason my bank account isn't pointing to an apple tree, because that's not what it's for.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, it may in fact be smart if you're somebody who believes in, like specifically Jesus or the biblical God or Allah in the Quran or whatever else. If you've got a specific God and you can't even get over the hurdle of a generic creator God, like step one, let me prove that there was some sort of supernatural creator. If you can't even get over that hurdle, then everything else that you believe is by definition more ridiculous. It's like saying, I have a girlfriend, you wouldn't know her because she goes to another school. And then when somebody says, okay, what school? And you're like, I don't want to tell you. Okay. What can you tell me about this school? Well, it's a really cool school and she goes there. Okay, cool.
Not helpful.
Is she coming with you to prom? I mean, have you found somebody you can pay off to do that yet? Bring God to prom, all you copers.
That's a good quote.
All right. And Sophie, welcome to the show. How can we help?
Hi, Sophie.
Hi. Is there a universal definition for evil?
I don't know if there's a universal definition for anything.
For anything, yeah.
Yeah, evil's an English word that we use to describe a number of different things, but they're assessments. If you're looking for, is there a universal concept of evil, irrespective of the language, then I don't think there's a universal concept that any particular act is evil, but evil's a label we put on that when the consequences of our actions are in conflict with a preferred goal.
So basically the definition you gave me is when the consequences of an action is contradictory to a goal.
Sure. When we're evaluating whether something is good or evil from a moral standpoint, we look at the consequences of an action and compare those to a goal. So if the goal is, longer life for humans, then killing someone, the consequence of that action is in conflict with the goal, and we could look at that as morally evil.
Okay. So
it's more complicated than that, but yeah, there's no
is universal evil because any event can be have a different goal, right? So if one person does an action to another person,
it's not about the goal. It's not about the goal of the event. It's about the goals of the moral system. And so if the goal of the moral system is a better world and an action demonstrably results in a not better world, then we would put that in more. Evil is a difficult word to do, but we would evaluate that as morally evil.
Yeah, that was the problem, because your definition includes to be a better system, which implies it's a good system, right? So evil and good are contradictory. So you're using like good to define evil. You're basically saying
what's your definition
evil is
of evil? Sophie, what's your definition of evil?
Well, I'm just trying to get the definition first, so I can understand what the atheist mindset is for evil.
Okay, so there's no atheist mindset. Even I may agree or disagree about whether or not something's evil. We may disagree with you. So the issue is, what difference does it make what the definition of evil is if you and I agree that something is not in our best interest or that is actually in opposition to what our best interests are? Shouldn't that be enough?
But the problem is that because we're different people, I might think it's better for the system, but you don't think it's better for the system. So if there's no definition for evil, saying something like "let's build a good society" has no definition, backbone to it. Because we don't have a definition for good.
You're raising an issue that's not a problem and one that theism doesn't solve.
So it does, but I don't want to talk about that quite yet. I just want to understand what
it doesn't. There is no. Listen to me very carefully. There is no objection that you can raise to secular morality that is in any way solved by appealing to a God. That's just a fact.
Okay. Sure, that's your idea. But I just wanted to get the definition for evil. And so
that is a fact. That is a fact. That is a fact which I can demonstrate.
So far, what I've got is evil.
So far,
is
what I've
when
got is that you don't listen. That's what I've got so far, is that you don't listen, and you don't want to discuss, and you don't want to defend. You've got some pet notion from an elementary, flawed understanding of morality that you're trying to force onto us. Do you have a solution to this problem of morality?
I do, but I actually need to understand what your solution is first. You see what I'm saying?
I need you to present your solution to this problem that you've raised.
I would love to. But your definition, you're saying that good is in your definition of evil.
I said there's not a definition of evil. I didn't say that, Sophie. Are you going to present your solution to this moral problem or not?
Yes, I will. But I just wanted to ask,
now.
So is there a universal evil example that you guys have?
Right now. Present your solution to this moral problem you think there is.
Okay. So I'll just pretend like you did answer my question so that I can
I did answer your question. Talk some more shit and pretend and avoid defending your stuff again and see how long you last.
I'm not trying. I'm just trying to get an answer, but you're telling me the definition of evil. And you're using good.
Sophie, shut up and listen.
You didn't use that word.
Your question was, is there a universal definition of evil? Here's my answer. No. I gave you that answer at the beginning. What's your next question? On your script?
So there is no definition for evil. So is there an example? If I give you an example.
No, listen. If you're not going to be precise, this is going to go very poorly. You said, is there a universal definition of evil? And I said, no. And then you said, so there's no definition of evil, which is not correct. What I said was, there's not a universal definition of evil. If you're not going to be precise, this is not going to go well. So you said, is there a universal definition of evil? I said, no. What's your next thing on your script?
So is there an example that you can think of, or I can just give you an example? Would that be easier to help the conversation?
I don't know what your script is, Sophie.
If I give you an example for something that actually is universal evil, then it has to exist, and the definition has to exist, right?
Okay. If you give an example for something that is universally evil, then that is an example of something that's universally evil. That doesn't mean we have a definition of universal evil. An example of something is not a definition of something. No.
But it does.
The fact that, would you listen? The fact that we have an example, would you listen? The fact that we have an example of something doesn't mean you have a definition of it. The example isn't the definition. And the fact that you have an example of something that would be evaluated as evil does not mean that evil exists as a thing. It's just an evaluation. So what's universal evil?
So I'll just say what I'm trying to clarify. If I give you an example of universal evil,
I literally, okay, I'm gonna mute you, and you're going to listen to me, and when I'm going to unmute you, and we're going to try this one final fucking time, I literally just asked you to give me an example of something that you think universally is evil. That's what I asked for. I don't need a preamble, nothing else. I would like for you now to give an example of what you think is universally evil. Here we go. Try it again, Sophie. What's universally evil?
Murder of a human.
Murder is a legal concept.
It is always tied, killing of a human. It is always tied.
Okay, stop. I'm going to mute you. So you started with murder of a human. Murder is a legal concept, but now you changed it to killing of a human. So if Eve is coming at me, if Eve is coming at me with a knife to kill me, and I kill her in self-defense, have I committed evil?
It's a consequence of something that she did that was evil.
Have I committed evil, Sophie?
No. Yes, you have, because she was doing something evil. You killing her is still evil, but what she was doing to you is also evil. So if you listen to my definition, what I said was killing of a human is is always tied to something that is
I find that
evil.
ridiculous. I find that beyond ridiculous.
If I'm about to take out a room of kids and Matt comes in and stops me by killing me, is that act evil that he just did to save the kids?
Hold on.
Is that an evil act? Yes or no?
Killing a room of kids, is that evil?
I just asked you a yes or no question. If I am killing a room full of kids, or I'm about to, and Matt comes in and kills me in order to save the life of those children, is Matt killing me an evil act?
It's still evil because there are numerous things he can do to stop you. Killing you is not the only thing.
If killing was somehow the only option at the moment.
You're implying that that's the only way, but that's not what it is.
If it is the only way, if it's the only way he can stop me, is that evil? If the only way for Matt to stop me from killing a room of children is to kill me, is that evil of Matt to kill me?
So
yes,
it's not the only way. It's never.
So then killing is not always evil.
Stop.
Then
Listen
that's
to
not
me.
universal.
Very careful, Sophie. Listen to me very carefully. You don't get to assert that that's not the only way. You need to go learn what a thought experiment is. This is how we address these issues. So if Eve says, I'm currently unloading a weapon into children, and the only way to stop Eve in this particular constructed scenario from killing another child is to kill her, would that act be immoral? You don't get to say there's another way. In the scenario, as it is defined, there is no other way. That's the purpose of a thought experiment. So if in the scenario, there's no other way, would it still be evil to kill her to stop her from killing more kids?
I can't tell when I'm off mute, but
you're off mute.
So, okay. So in an atheist world where there is no God.
Okay, I'm going to mute you.
Oh my God.
You get one last chance, Sophie. One last chance. I'm sorry that you only want to talk about what you want to talk about. But Eve asked a question. In the scenario where she is actively shooting children, and the only available way to stop her from shooting children that you have is to kill her. If under that very specific scenario, you kill her, is that evil? That's the question. Has nothing to do with an atheist worldview. That is the question. Answer that question.
It does depend on your definition of evil.
I'm asking
based on your definition.
Based on your definition of evil.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, evil is killing another human. So based on the definition, it is evil to kill another human.
So are you then saying that if Matt stops me from killing other children, the only way he can, which is to kill me, you're saying that is an evil act?
Yes, to kill another human.
And your definition of evil is shit. Absolute shit. Because the alternative is
you have no way. You're saying self-defense.
You can't even define it. You say this definition is shit, but you can't even define evil without using the word good.
You can't. You haven't defined evil.
The word good. You made.
You haven't defined evil. You've just asserted that it's evil, and you've given one of the stupidest things I've heard, which is to deny that self. You gave an example.
You didn't. Of universal evil.
You gave an example of what you think is universal evil. You haven't given me an example of anything that's identifiably universal evil.
So you're telling me somebody going to kill a room full of kids and you killing that person, that whole scenario is not evil? There's nothing evil in that scenario?
The person killing all the kids is doing evil. The person killing them to keep them from killing kids is not. They're saving lives.
Right. But you have to have the beginning of that story to be able to write your story. So basically, she has to kill a room full of kids for you to justify you killing her. So you can't say,
that's why that was the thought experiment.
Is not bad. No, it's tied to that first part, and that first part is evil.
You made the assertion, Sophie. Sophie, you made the assertion that it is evil to kill another person. And Matt and I were making the point that that is not always the case, and therefore that is not an appropriate universal definition of evil. Because as this thought experiment very easily shows to anybody rationally thinking, that is not true. That is not evil for Matt to kill the person that's killing other children, if that is the only solution.
I got another one. Sophie,
okay,
listen.
Hold on a second. So
no, you don't fucking tell me. Here, you're muted. Shut up. Don't ever tell me to hold on my own show. If I swerve while I'm driving a car to avoid running over a person, and in the process of swerving to avoid running over a person, I hit and kill another person, is that evil? You're off mute.
Sorry,
is that evil?
Oh,
you're off mute. Is that evil?
So, like I said, killing another human is always evil, and you have to justify it because you are.
Sophie, I'm going to mute you again. I'm going to take you off mute. And when I take you off mute, the only words that can come out of your mouth are yes and no. In the scenario where I swerve my car to avoid running over someone crossing the street, if I kill another human being while trying to avoid this one, is that evil? Yes or no? You're off mute.
I already said yes.
Goodbye.
Universal evil.
Goodbye.
That is absolutely ridiculous.
Not only did you violate the rule about only saying yes or no, but you have the most, you don't get to lecture us about problems with secular morality when you have one of the most dangerous, broken ideas of pre-kindergarten simplistic morality. None of us want to kill people.
Wow, that was
you
rough.
equate accidental death, there's a reason in the United States why when you kill another person, it could be first-degree murder, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, manslaughter, negligent homicide, any number of other things. And that's because we've graduated beyond the simplistic and stupid thou shalt not kill, which was a lie at the beginning and remains a corrupted, broken moral system. I'm sorry that it's been taught to you, but we understand that the world is more complicated than that. And that someone incidentally killing someone while trying to save somebody else is different from someone intentionally killing someone to save someone else, which is different from someone killing someone mistakenly, which is different from someone intentionally planning and executing someone. The fact that you have this gross, somebody in chat said, well, at least she's consistent. Congratulations, you are consistent, and you have a consistently broken moral compass that nobody should pay attention to. Your moral compass is more ridiculous than Yahweh's, who prescribes the death penalty for picking up sticks on the Sabbath and for not being a virgin on your wedding night. Yahweh prescribes a death penalty for a whole host of things because Yahweh is as uninformed and irrational and without empathy as you are. The notion that you can't even imagine a scenario where it may be undesirable and yet justifiable that someone might die to save others. I mean, I get it. Jains and other pacifists would probably oppose killing under all those circumstances as well. And so on that front, maybe you might be a better human being than some other people. But don't ever call in again. You have no understanding of these subjects and you are incapable of engaging at a thought experiment level and engaging in the abstract. Concepts fly right by you. And I'm not saying this is an insult. It's not your fault. It's not about IQ. It's not, who knows what the issue is. You do not possess the capability to have an abstract conversation and evaluate somebody else's position. And this is what's led you to believe that there needs to be a universal definition of evil that's always, let me give you an example of a universal, killing another human is always evil. You've given no justification for why that should be considered and plenty of examples for why that absolutely shouldn't be considered.
Yep. That's the problem with the binary thinking that theists who make that claim buy into. There's no way she actually believes that either. That's my thing. I don't think that was honest.
It's possible that, and I'm not going to armchair diagnose anybody or anything else.
Sure.
It's entirely possible that somebody could have been spoon-fed a particularly simplistic moral code. This is always wrong, always, under all circumstances, boom. And just never had any kind of propensity or capability to stretch beyond that. But
right.
We got a couple more calls left to get to before we run out of callers, and then I got to get to super chats because Jimmy's going to be on in like an hour. And so Kurt in DC, oh my gosh, Kurt has a question that I already wish I didn't have, but go for it, Kurt. Well, welcome back.
we don't have to talk about it. I cyclically have an itch to sort of go back to some of the folks that I used to listen to at a much younger age. I was actually growing up in India, and you, Matt, amongst some others, were instrumental in sort of a mix of a philosophical awakening and also really contending with atheism in a fairly dogmatic environment. And, I was sort of scratching that itch, and I sort of go back to something that you or some of the others that I like have engaged in debates, and I stumbled onto the Jordan Peterson debate and had just so much to reflect on, ask questions about. But if we don't have to talk about it, I also have other
ask your
sort of
question.
questions.
I don't want questions. So ask the question you want to ask, and then I'll avoid it.
Sure. So my first question is: there seems to be very often an intuitive discomfort that people have with the possibility that some of the propensities that we have that correlate to moral behavior are products of, say, evolutionary mechanisms that we sort of, for example, found it in our self-interest to adhere to certain sort of moral precepts, because when everybody else followed it, that led to sort of communal harmony and our ability to survive and reproduce. And I'm always sort of curious why there's this sort of intuitive discomfort with a potentially, maybe it feels like an egoistic idea or foundation for it, but why it feels to theists very often is the sort of corrupt notion that maybe the foundations of our morality could be situated in an explanation like that. And I was curious if you had sort of reflections on where that intuitive discomfort may come from and how we might be able to challenge that.
I genuinely could not find a cogent point to latch onto in anything you just said.
Okay. Here, let me try again. So the idea that a lot of our sort of understandings of sorry, did you say something?
Nope.
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard. For example, let us say theists often challenge the idea that if there wasn't a God, or if you didn't believe in a God, you wouldn't be moral, right? It's a sort of general idea that you hear from theists a lot. And one of the responses could be situated in an evolutionary idea that no, there are entirely other reasons why, even without some sort of systematic philosophical deduction coming to certain moral codes or precepts, we might be inclined to behave in ways that...
Hey, Kurt?
Yes.
Kurt? I fell asleep. Can you ask a question with some clarity that I might be able to answer?
Sure. Why do you think people might find discomfort in the idea that our moral inclinations might be a result of a selfish, self-interest oriented set of codes that developed evolutionarily, rather than something that either came from God or some sort of genuinely other-oriented basis?
Why do I think people find discomfort in the idea that our moral inclinations might come from some source other than a God?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that after 4 or 5 times of getting that sentence down to something manageable, I got it right. I think people find discomfort in the idea that our moral inclinations might come from something other than a God, because religion has permeated society and has given them a narrative where, like our last caller, they think there must be some universal definition of evil and some universal source for that definition that goes beyond subjective human assessments or the impersonal machinations of or unguided evolution. And they like the idea that there's a God who says this is good and this is bad, and that's what the entirety of society has been infused with. So in the same reason that they're afraid of people who look different or have different color skin or speak different languages or might come from a different planet, it's xenophobia. The notion that there's a foreign thing that you might have to learn that might make it harder or more difficult or might mean that you're wrong. That's a bunch of reasons for people to feel discomfort.
Got it. And as a result of that explanation, what do you think an effective intervention would be? Would it be in public education?
Well, it's going to be in some form of education. I've basically spent the last 19 plus years doing that here, and other people have been doing it elsewhere.
Do you think, say, teaching moral philosophy in schools would help?
I think teaching critical thinking and skepticism, and getting people to shift beyond the notion that we are handed down morality from above. I think, yeah, teaching moral philosophy in some sense, even if you don't get to an answer, would help override the fact that most people, like a previous caller, think that they have an answer and that it's from God and that it's the right one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I think, I guess a related question then is, to a lot of folks, they see this sort of dichotomy between the underlying reasoning in the scientific method and the underlying reasoning in questions of moral philosophy, where I think that the basis of both of those at some level is this sort of syllogistic reasoning. But it seems that sometimes people give themselves a greater license to engage in sort of armchair moral reasoning when they might not do the same for scientific reasoning. And so I'm sort of curious how we might be able to break that notion down, where people sort of say, okay, there's a certain degree of learned rigor that needs to come with moral reasoning as well. And yeah, I've always been sort of lost on how to challenge people on that idea.
The problem is indoctrination. And so people are holding these dogmas and they cannot even question the idea that morals would come from anybody other than the God that they've been taught. gave them those morals. So there's a lot more to this than just, oh, they just don't know better. It's indoctrination. So to get them to even ask the question of could morality be from a different source, that's a question that's not supposed to be asked.
Yeah, thanks, Eve. I agree with that too. And also curious if you think the sort of often what happens is, I think, when people are confronted, like in many of the previous calls, evidence or a gap in the reasoning, there's a sort of either cognitive dissonance or some sort of shock response where they feel the need to contort even what might be some common sense or generally understood moral principles, which don't need to necessarily be correct, but stuff that they would, outside of this context, agree with, but in that moment when confronted with such a challenge, sort of contort things in ways that are convenient. And it's really hard to sort of understand how to challenge somebody who's already at that point. So that's why I was curious where you think the appropriate moment of intervention might be, as opposed to somebody who's here and seems so willing at this point to break their understanding of reality in order to maintain a view.
Yeah, I don't think there's likely to be one right answer. I mean, I've spent the last couple of decades doing this somewhat and actually lecturing at universities and everything else. I'm also not an expert on what sort of pedagogy is going to be available and most useful at different times. I don't have any understanding of, likely at 6 years old would be the prime time to do this, and at 9 years old. We're fighting a war on a number of different fronts because, first of all, people have the freedom to teach their views and their religious views, and do. Then it's indoctrinated from the get-go. So we're undoing some stuff, and also we're fighting just general poor education systems. Not that they're the worst ever. I mean, people learn stuff, but you get a classroom where you have too many students per teacher to properly focus on this, where the curriculum is where the curriculum is battled over by people with different ideologies, and where we can't just get by with teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I don't know at what point the more complicated topics are, which is why I'm not advocating teaching moral philosophy. Instead, it should start with, let's get the basics of skepticism, critical thinking. Let's get the basics of epistemology and logical fallacies. Let's get the basics of citizenship and civics, where what is my duty to my fellow man based on where I'm at, and how do we? Right now, we're fighting over, just like every single day I'm asked, what is a woman? And as if it's a gotcha. Just like when Sophie calls in and like, what's the definition of universal evil? As if it's a gotcha. Neither of those are remotely gotchas. They're also not particularly productive. And so I don't have the answer other than, yes, we need to do better at education. And in many ways, we need to do better at the how to think instead of what to think. And I think we can work the how to think with regard to epistemology and skepticism and everything else. We can add in aspects through sociology, which I hated studying when I was in school, and now I love it. I had a fundamental misunderstanding of what sociology was. I told my teacher when I was skipping, I was like, why would I want to come to class? It's just the study of people. I see people all the fucking time. I study people all the time, and I do, but I don't, it's like, categorizing, putting all this in. I didn't have that interest in it. I don't know what the right answer is. But we've got to keep working on maybe 4 or 5 different answers.
Right. Yeah, I think it's multifaceted because the issue at hand is multifaceted. So the solution has to come from all sorts of different places. I think mental health can be a part of it. I think education is a big part of it. I think the promotion of skepticism is going to only help things. So there's a lot of things. And as far as if you're asking, when you're talking to an individual, that's always going to depend on the individual that you're talking to. You never know what's going to make someone feel comfortable in a conversation enough to get intellectually honest. So it's amazing that you care and want to address the issues, but I think there's no one size fit all.
Yeah, well, I appreciate both of your work, and it's working. It made a huge difference in my life. So whatever small comfort that it may offer as a fruit of your results, please do take that. Thanks for your time.
Great, thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
Appreciate it. We have one more call to get to before we're moving on to super chat. So that's the thing. We're gonna do one more call, then we're gonna take some super chats, and then we're gonna wrap things up so that Jimmy Snow can come in and tell us all about what's going on with the GOP debate this evening, which I can't wait to watch. But the final call, and I'm gonna not pronounce this correctly, but from the Netherlands, pronouns him. Is it Jeroen? Oh, your audio is so bad it didn't even sound like actual sound.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Sorry. How do you call it in the Dutch? It's Jeroen, but Jeroen is also okay.
Jeroen? Jeroen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's
well,
good.
welcome, Jeroen. Please ask your question and we'll do our best to answer it.
Yeah.
You've got a question?
You still here?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. I just wanted you to tell us what your question was that you wanted us to ask, or you wanted to ask us.
Sorry. First, hey Eve, how are you doing?
Hi. How are
the
you?
question is, hello. The question is, when I'm in a debate with somebody who has a religion, and we talk about politics, and sometimes the conversation goes to religion, and I'm making the comment, well, the religion is possibly to blame to the war or something that is going on. And they say, no, that's not the case. It's the politics that's doing it and not the religion. I hope I'm making myself clear right now. I'm a little bit nervous, so sorry.
If I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking a question related to, for example, Israel-Palestine, and you're saying that it's religion, and they're saying it's not religion, it's politics.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah, and I know it's both, but it's the answer is it's politics. It's not religion. Religion is peace, and the religion does not do anything with the politics. And how do you respond to that? How would Eve or you, Matt, respond to that?
I'll let Eve go.
So let me make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. You're saying their response is that religion has nothing to do with this because religion wouldn't take these actions. These are political actions only.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we already are seeing over here in the States, Christian nationalism play out in different ways, and it's not looking the same, but it's a similar process where you have people that believe very specific things, and they believe that a country should be a specific religion, and then they legislate things based off of that belief. And that is the combination of religion and politics. As soon as you take those beliefs anywhere outside of your private home and private practice and start implementing them on others and legislating others with them, or use them as motivation for action and political action, war, any of that, then you are mixing the two. I don't know that that's even up for debate, really. I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah, I understand the answer, but it's more like the answer is that they are giving is like, religion and politics are not mixed at that moment, and they're trying to make politics the word I'm looking for is human, and religion is more like personal and for yourself.
Yeah, so, the problem with that is
That's the point I'm stuck with at that moment.
So it's the sort of thing that you're going to hear often because, for example, Israel has no official state religion. There's no official state religion in Israel, but the religious origins and history of Israel, they feel that is their promised land that God gave to them, and that Jerusalem is the holiest cities, and they belong there, and it is theirs from God. Similarly, it's also where the Dome of the Rock is. So you have two competing religions that think there's something sacred and holy about that place for them.
Right.
They're not willing to share it. They are willing to kill each other and destroy each other. And that's not just a political thing. Everything is political. Everything is politics. Politics is about what governments do. And right now, the Israeli government is taking action against an illegitimate terrorist quasi-government in Hamas, or at least representative of some, but it's not representative of all, and it's a complicated thing. So if somebody says it's not religion, it's just politics, that's simply not true. And if somebody says it's just politics and is not religion, that's also just not true. And at the end of the day, whether it's religion or politics, whether it's 50-50, whether it's 70-30, 80-20, 90-10, I don't give a fuck. What's the solution?
Right.
Because there is none.
Well, I think there's a solution.
I think the solution is in this case.
I think the solution I think the solution is for the United Nations and a body of other nations to come in and completely take over everything in that area and have someone else run it, allowing everybody there, Palestinian, Israeli, just anybody and everybody there, to live there as citizens, but under somebody else's governance, because it's clear none of them should be in charge of this shit.
I'm disagreeing at that point, because I'm more like quoting Christopher Hitchens in this case. If two parties believe in absolutely truth and have the power of God behind them, why do they have to listen to the other side? Because both sides are believing in absolute truth and have the truth on their side. So there is no solution in Israel and Palestine in this case. What we can do as a society is to make sure that the peace is long-lasting. But the hate and the belief is still, at this point, going on strong. But after a couple of decades, I presume, it will get less and less and less and less. In the meanwhile, I still am convinced that America has got a big part in the relationship with Israel, and can be a big involvement to a temporary peace over there. Do you agree or not?
I think that could be part of it. I gave you what my solution was.
Okay. I'm paraphrasing Christopher Hitchens in this case, so it's not for me. But thank you for asking the questions, and thank you for your time, even for your answering the question.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, of course.
No worries. And
if I just want to add this, it feels kind of callous to talk about this as like we're just talking about politics when there are real people dying right now. And I think that's one of the important things to look at, is that there's way smarter people than us that already are struggling to come up with a solution. And these conversations, we have to remember that there are real people experiencing real consequences. And while it is nice to be able to point to things and say, see religion, see that, and I'm going to agree just as much as you or Matt on the dangers of religion, these are still real people that are experiencing something horrific that thankfully none of us can even relate to right now.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. We're not talking about facts or whatever. We're talking about human beings who have a right to live and to live in their own beliefs and understanding. Because I'm also a humanist. That's it. So, and I strongly believe in the good of humanity, and the good will survive. I hope, and hope is not a good reason, but sometimes it gives you a good feeling. Sometimes.
Yep. Okay, we're kind of stuck though.
Yep.
All right, Aaron.
Yeah.
I gotta wrap the show.
Can I
Thank you
ask
so much for
you
your
for
patience.
one more request? It's a small request. Can you say on the YouTube, on the internet, I've got two dogs over here. One is called Johnny. The other one is called Bobby. Johnny is an old black Labrador. He's going on a pension because he's a seeing dog. I presume you call it because I'm blind. And the other one is Bobby. He's a big poodle. And he's taking over the job. And can you say something sweet about Johnny and about Bobby? And that's it.
Can I say something sweet about Johnny and Bobby? Oh, yeah. Johnny's retiring and Bobby's taking over?
Yeah.
Johnny, you've been a good doggy and you deserve some rest. And Bobby, thank you for stepping up and being awesome.
You're here.
I'm gonna give them a hug from you, Eve, and from you, Matt, and give your girlfriend Matt
give him an
a big
extra
hug
treat
from me. She's the most beautiful person I ever seen in the world, and she's because of being blind, because she's so goddamn beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Honey, a blind guy just wanted me to give you a hug because you're the most beautiful woman he's ever seen.
It's very sweet. Thank you.
All right. We got super chats to get to, and there's not a ton of them, which means the rest of you should be getting super chats in. Although, to be fair, I know a lot of you guys are probably getting ready to go over and watch Jimmy when it's all done. So here we go. That one's already up there. Okay. You want to go first? Since it's about you.
$9.99 from Wonder. Eve was framed as my all-time favorite handle. Hope you have a great show tonight. I wish I could watch live, but I'll catch it later. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Wonder. And when you watch this back, I hope you didn't have to take too many breaks from everything that happened.
Yeah, sorry about the audio issues. We hopefully resolved them, but that was exciting.
Sun Sick, thank you for all your content, Matt. I watch a lot of your videos to help me form better arguments. Cool. When you get the better arguments, send some back to me so I have better arguments too. Everybody, that's all. If we all work together, we'll get better arguments. Problem is that you can have the best arguments, and people still won't accept them. It's strange to me to live in a world that is so evenly divided. It's like I was talking about at the beginning, once upon a time, it was like, oh, we're 50-50 split in the United States. And now we're like a three-way split. And it's just, what percentage of people can point to the same thing and completely disagree? I mean, I guess it's like the dress or anything else. What's the color of this? What's the color of that? I had a really great optical illusion that I shared with Aron today, where there is, I'll see if I can find it in a minute, but it's ultimately there are what appear to be green lines and blue lines that are actually the same color, but the colors around them change it and stuff like that. But you could argue about whether they're green or blue. And 50% of people might say, oh, it's blue, or oh, it's green. But there's a way to show that they're actually the same color. And yet we live in a world where after you've shown that they're the same color, fully a third of the people are still going to be like, nope, it's something else.
Ugh, it's frustrating. $19.99 from Greg Murkowski. Matt and Eve, do you think evangelical Christians can ever get past the stench of Trump, or are they forever marked with this perversion? I honestly hope that they can't get past it.
Yeah, it'd be nice, but everything fades.
They should go down in history for having supported him. I think that's what they've become known for good reason.
It's one of those things where it would be nice if it were to latch around their neck forever, but they've already started turning on him, and you're going to see more of it tonight with Chris Christie as well.
Yeah.
So, yep. But also the memories of people are awful, and mine too. I mean, there are people that I've cut out of my life, and I don't remember why. But that's because I'm pretty good at letting go of it. Like, if I hang on to it, then whatever the problem was continues to bother me, even though it's clearly not bothering them at all. And in that situation, letting go of it's the better thing. And so while I'd love to hold some people responsible for attaching themselves to Trump so thoroughly forever, I think even I'm going to let it go at some point, because we're going to have new issues to deal with and we're going to have new things to focus on. But I noticed that Greg Murkowski sent another $9.99. Here's an extra gift because Eve is such a terrific guest. With your new title as physicist, is there anything to string theory? So yes, clue us in on some physicists.
As a non-physicist, labeled physicist, no comment. But thank you, Greg, for the extra. $9.99 from Mike Schlobs. I hope I'm saying that right. First-time viewer and senior live. So many stories I struggle with in Scripture. At what point do you start to think something was afoot with Scripture? Not trying to derail conversation. Matt, what point were you reading the Bible and you're like, this isn't adding up?
Oh, from the very beginning. The problem is that the reason religions are, the successful religions are successful because they have a way of dealing with those concerns. You take something like Christianity. Almost everybody that I met had questions when they were first introduced to it. We were kids in Sunday school, it'd be this and that. I had questions quite frequently, and the mechanism that Christianity in particular, the Protestant, Southern Baptist, fundamentalist, evangelical version that I grew up with, the method that had was, well, you'd go to your pastor, or in my case, parents or an uncle, and they'd tell you what they thought about it, but it was always, we can't fully understand and comprehend this, but we can be confident that God is good, God knows the answer, and we should put our faith and confidence in God. And if we're lucky, when we get to heaven, we have our new body, and we are in a place free from sin, God will provide us with an explanation and understanding that makes all of this more clear. It is one of the fundamental, I feel gross spewing this out again. But yes, it has that thing in there, which is, we don't know, God moves in mysterious ways, but someday we will. And just having the confidence that there was somebody who had that was, it was enough.
Yeah. Yep.
$10 from Pete. I'm an atheist because of Matt D and Tracy H YouTube clips and reading Sagan. Well, awesome.
Amazing.
Sagan is amazing.
$15 from Curtis Ressinger. You check out the podcast Rock That Doesn't Roll, the story of Christian music. They look at personal stories from people who grew up listening to CCM. It's a hoot. Sounds funny.
Rock That Doesn't Roll, story of Christian music. Is that is it?
Also, I realized I just read that as you, and obviously this person is trying to say yo, so let me correct that now.
I'll try and look that up, Curtis. Thanks so much. It's something I'd kind of be interested in, but I'm almost more interested in like reliving the backward masking satanic panic stuff that came out there. By the way,
I know.
I'll pop this up on the screen. This is the lines that most of you will see as green and the ones that you will see as blue are actually the same color, but because we alternate between a sort of fuchsia and orange as the contrast between them, they're actually more like a teal color, and your brain just absolutely turns that into this. Now you can, I don't have the second image. There's a second image, and you can actually download that and test it out. You can pull it up in your favorite Paint or Photoshop program and sample the colors in two of those locations, and you can see from the samples that they're actually the same color. But I understand how that can be confusing, and I understand how it can be difficult for someone to get that. But there's a way to clearly prove it and yet we still have people who just won't believe it after the fact. That's the frustrating part of the world we're in. $10 from Yes, It's Me. What's a good answer to a theist asking, how do I know secular Bible scholars and historians are being truthful about claims against the Bible? I don't need to rely on secular Bible scholars or historians being truthful. I'm able to read it and assess it myself. And even if I only relied on Christian sources about the Bible says what it says. I find what Christian sources say about the Bible objectionable. I don't have to rely on the secular ones. So yeah, if you're having a specific kind of back and forth with somebody and it's a problem, hit me up with a more specific question. But in general, yeah, I don't. Maybe the right answer is, how do you know that Christian scholars and historians are being truthful about claims for the Bible? Why does
that is the better question.
Their skepticism only apply one direction? Hey, just go to the Bible where it says, let God be true and every man a liar. It doesn't say every secular man a liar. It says every man. And leave it so that it's men, so that maybe we can trust women. Boom. Here's the next super chat.
$9.99 from Melody Kate, just because it is November and I love the line.
And thank you. We love you too, Melody.
Thanks, Melody.
It's also going to be in November on every show for the rest of the month. $10 from Will Be Friend. Matt, thanks for everything you do. I love the guests you bring on the line to provide unique perspectives and different information to help people get over religion. You've helped me tremendously. Thanks so much. I mean, I do try to get a variety of people on. I feel like, and maybe it's bad show to do this, I feel like the specific nature of some callers calling in to get right in my niche didn't really give Eve the fair shot at answering some things that I wish we would have.
I really wanted to talk to Sophie, but she would not answer the questions. It was very frustrating. I feel like we could have had a good conversation and it could have gone somewhere had she have been willing to engage honestly. And she wasn't. But, if she changes her mind, I've got Instagram.
So here we go. Not only that, but someday, not too far down the road, I hope, we'll get Eve back on. And Sophie, if you're there and you'd rather have a conversation with Eve, I will shut up and I have snakes I need to list and things like that. Happy to let Eve take over, and she can maybe do a better job getting you on the topic.
To people,
maybe not.
Yeah, to people who like to say that Matt doesn't let me talk or whatever, I see those comments in the chat sometimes. First of all, Matt absolutely does, and if I want to talk, I'll talk. But we had some sound issues, and that was the audio issues were we were working around those. So Matt is an amazing host, and he absolutely lets me talk.
I'm a fuck up that talks a lot, which makes it easy to make those accusations. But I think we've got the audio thing sorted now. So
we finally do.
The weirdest thing about the audio issue is that I didn't even do anything. Like, I tried a million things that Eve was coming on and off the screen. We tried so many different things to fix it, and then finally it just stopped happening. And I no idea.
Is this you or me, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's you.
$10 from Matthew Hydro. Great show, Matt and Eve. I was wondering if either of you find Dan Dennett's intuition pumps useful, and if so, which ones do you use in conversation or debate? I don't know even this name, so maybe I should, but I'll let Matt answer.
Dan Dennett's a philosopher and an educator at Tufts University. He's also one of the founders with Linda Lascola of the Clergy Project in cooperation with Dan Barker.
I should know this name, yeah.
Yeah. Among his many books, including Elbow Room, The Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting, he's a famous compatibilist. He's one of the original Four Horsemen with Dawkins, Harris, and Hitchens. He wrote a book called Intuition Pumps, and I have the book, and I've read the book. I don't know, Matthew, I don't know that there's any particular intuition pump of his that sticks in my head that I necessarily use. It's entirely possible I may use several of them without even remembering that's the case, because when I read Intuition Pumps, I remember thinking, yeah, I already do stuff like this, or I do stuff like that, or maybe this might be a slightly different way, but it didn't. Don't get me wrong, I love Dan's thinking, and it's a good book, but there was nothing in there that went, oh wow, this particular intuition pump is not only something you need to use, but you need to focus on it and maybe teach it to people. I might be doing that without thinking about it. But $10 from Monkey to Typewriter. Hey Eve, are you 35 yet? Because if so, I've got a solution to the Trump problem. Eve was framed for president/physicist. Matt can be your Cheney. You want me to shoot people in the face? Great show. Thanks, y'all. You're not eligible to be president yet, are you?
Not yet. Not yet. A few years away. And also, I wouldn't wish that job on my worst enemy. So that sounds terrible. It's more likely that I would become a physicist than president, and that is impossible. So
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemies, because if my worst enemies became president, my life would definitely be worse.
Yeah, true.
All right. Well, this is supposed to be the final super chat, unless somebody gets one in under the gun. So here you go.
$10 from the late Peter Cook. Election season is fast approaching. Remember, this time try not to let wannabe demagogues with cocaine incontinence construct your reality for you. Or am I asking for too much?
Fair. It's a wild world that we find ourselves in. Yeah, so I already touched on some of the stuff that I was going to use for the closing, because I came up at different points. We've got another one coming in right now. From Honestly Atheist. Hey, Matt and Eve, what are your thoughts on efforts to forward congregational humanism, such as ethical societies? I feel like there's a unique void that these organizations can potentially fill. Thank you. So there are groups like Sunday Assembly, Ethical Society of so-and-so. There's Unitarian Universalist ones. There's, apart from Sunday Assembly, there's another one. There's one or two. There's several like this. I'm a fan of this sort of congregational humanism for other people. I know what that sounds like. I recognize that there are people who really benefit from regular communal gatherings, particularly people who find that they're the only secular individual in their area, the only one they know. They don't have somebody to interact with. And I got no problem with people getting together and holding hands and singing songs and listening to a lecture and doing the things that other people would label as church. That sort of thing exists not because there's a religion, but because there are humans and we are social creatures. I just don't have, I'll go speak at them. I do so much stuff, and I'm constantly just surrounded by atheists and atheist community on a daily basis that I don't need to take my weekend and go do this regularly as a sort of thing. But I love the fact that they exist for everybody who wants to. And if that's the sort of thing that you or anybody else has been missing, by all means, look into ethical societies, look into Unitarian Universalists, look into Sunday Assembly, Oasis. There's a couple of others out there. And if none of those are available in your area, reach out to recoveringfromreligion.org or one of the national atheist and secular organizations like American Atheist, Freedom from Religion Foundations, because they will have local community groups that can get together. If you are feeling absolutely alone, if you feel like you have no friends, no community, if you are sidelined because everybody you know is religious of some type or right wing of some type or whatever it is, reach out to Recovering from Religion, Secular Humanist Foundations, Ethical Societies, Sunday Assembly, Oasis, American Atheist, Freedom from Religion Foundation, and more, to see if you can find organizations in your area so that you can find a landing place and people to interact with. Hit up message boards. Nobody should be alone who doesn't want to be. On my Sunday mornings, I'm never alone. if Arden's not here, we're probably talking on the phone. If it's a Sunday morning, there's nobody else here, probably a day for me to actually, I don't know, get some other work done or play a video game or get away from some of the other stuff. But that's where I am incredibly fortunate. I'm fortunate to have friends in the community. I'm fortunate to have organizations that invite me to come out to be a speaker, things like that. I'm incredibly fortunate that despite the fact that I've worked with some organizations that will profit off of what I've said for years, even though I wish they would disappear, I've got you guys. I have an audience here at the line. I have an audience on my Patreon. I have an audience on my YouTube. I have people on Twitter, on Facebook, who are also in my lives in person in many different ways. When I talk about Wednesday being the most joyous of therapy sessions I could imagine, that's because of you guys here, and it's because of guests like Eve. Now that we've got Eve's audio sorted out, we should put up a poll during Jimmy's show that's following up here to see how quickly we should get her back on the hang up and whether or not we can get Sophie to call back in. Tell everybody where to find you. Where should they look for you? What do you got going on, and how quickly you're willing to come back?
I'll come back anytime, especially now that hopefully we have the audio issue sorted and I can hear everybody talking and they can hear me. I am over on Twitter. Actually, I'm not on Twitter anymore, I don't think, because I don't know how to use it anymore now that it's not even called Twitter anymore. I'm on Threads, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on TikTok at Eve_was_framed. And I'm working on a Patreon that's going to have more long format content, because right now I just have my short format, my 30, 60 second, 15 second clips. But yeah, come over there, hang out, get in the comment section. There's a lot of really exciting conversations happening, I think, except for on Facebook, and it's just the worst of the worst I've ever seen. But all the more reason for you to go over there too. So
all right, final notes for today. As a reminder, the Transatlantic Call-In Show is going to air tomorrow at 2 p.m. with Arden and Katy. And it's going to end on time because I have tickets with Arden to go see the Marvels tomorrow night. So, nice. Hooray. I'll be back for the Sunday show, myself and Shannon Q, long overdue. Shannon Q, long overdue. Maybe you'll see us engage in a discussion / debate about non-cognitive or theological non-cognitivism or igtheism. Maybe we'll avoid it entirely. Monday will be Skeptalk, hosted by Erica Gutzik-Gibbon. And on Tuesday, Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock. And I think it's Footless Joe. I think the one from Tuesday got moved, but I'm not sure. Because unfortunately, I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to talk with Dave. And I'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Hanging Up with J. Mike. In the meantime, we had questions on a lot of subjects today and criticisms from some people whose patience was evidently considerably less than mine was, challenging my patience. And doesn't matter because he's right. I can be incredibly patient or I can be impatient. I can be an asshole or I can be empathetic. I'm a human like all the rest of us. And I got feelings, I got good days, I got bad days. I'm grateful for everybody who participates, everybody who listens, everybody who gives me feedback, including feedback that I think is just bizarre on occasion because it gives me a barometer to see what kind of perspective an audience has. None of us are going to be perfect. And if we want a ceasefire in the Middle East, if we want to have lasting peace, we can't oversimplify it and say, oh, it's all religion, or oh, it's all politics, or oh, here's what we should do. Even my off-the-cuff suggestion of neither of them should be in charge of the area, somebody else should, is based on a really simplistic notion of if you have two kids and they're fighting and there's no way for them to resolve it, you shouldn't put either one of them in charge of the other. Somebody else has to step in. Unfortunately, things get complicated when you're in international law and you have sovereign nations. You don't get to come in and just necessarily impose. And that's where diplomacy comes in. If you have a simplistic view of the issue, you're probably never going to find anything other than a simplistic attempted solution to the problem. If you have a simplistic view of absolute morality or absolute truth or universal this or universal that, rather than recognizing that the world is a complex and both beautiful and ugly mess that we've got to sort through, you're probably going to come up with the wrong answers. And as the secular humanist manifestos would say, we are apparently here and have to cooperate and work together. And we can't rely on supernatural external intervention. We can't appeal to what we think a God wants. We can't appeal to what we know our perfect God in our model demands, because that doesn't apply to everyone. I know some of you think it does, but you have to realize that you don't get to impose those beliefs onto others. And so under secular humanism, you get to keep your religious beliefs, you get to share your religious beliefs, and you get to practice your religious beliefs right up to the point where they begin impacting other people. That's the foundation of secular humanism that my Christian and Muslim debating opponents never seem to want to address honestly. We may have the solution to many problems in this world, and it's not being listened to or adhered to, in part because people are convinced that they have a perfect authority, that their imperfect mind, their flawed reasoning, has somehow managed to grasp something perfect that they just want to share with everybody else by imposing it on everybody else. You don't get to do that. I will always stand up in opposition to that. I will try not to be the worst about it as many times as I can. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Get ready to go watch Jimmy do a Sometimes show with the GOP debate. We're out of here. Thanks to our moderators. Thanks to all those patrons that are just going to scroll up there on the screen. This is where I was supposed to pretend to get undressed, but I'm not even wearing a shirt with buttons. I'd have to just like yank it all off. If you want to support what we're doing, you can join the channel. You can also go to patreon.com/calltheline.